You think you know someone. Especially when they are your own sister. But one night she sat across from me, shaking, and said 6 words I will never forget. I have to tell you something. What came next shattered everything. I always thought I knew Kylie. We grew up side by side. Same house. Same rules. Same backyard where we built forts and made up stories. She is 1 year older, but in a lot of ways, I always felt like the one protecting her. She was softer. Quieter. But she was mine. My sister. My best friend. That night, when she spoke, everything I thought I understood about her cracked open. She was not the same person anymore. And maybe I was not either. Before we go further, I need to say something important. This story is not easy. It deals with real things. Betrayal. Love. And the kind of heartbreak that does not always look dramatic from the outside. It also touches on new motherhood and emotional decisions that do not have clean answers. If you are not in the headspace for that, it is okay to stop here. But if you stay, just know I am going to tell the truth. The way it happened. Kylie has always been my person. The one who saw me at my worst and never flinched. The one who stayed quiet when I needed space and spoke up when I was spinning. People like to talk about soulmates as if they are always romantic, but mine has always been her. From the outside, we looked like your average siblings. But inside our world, we were something else. We protected each other. Grew up learning how to read each other's silences. Kylie was born just a year before me, but it always felt like we were twins in a strange, unspoken way. We were close in age, but even closer in spirit. I was the more outgoing one. I got into trouble. She kept me grounded. She was the quiet one, but I always knew when she was sad, or hiding something, even before she said a word. That's the kind of connection we had. It was strong. And I thought, unbreakable. Even when we both got older, that bond never really went anywhere. Sure, we had our own lives. Jobs. Partners. But when she called, I answered. When I needed someone to listen at 2 a.m, she picked up. No hesitation. She was the most consistent thing in my life. And maybe that is why I was so blind to what was coming. Mitchell, her husband, came into the picture a few years back. On the surface, he was everything you are supposed to look for in a partner. Steady. Employed. Calm. The kind of guy who could fix a leaky sink and grill on Sundays. Kylie introduced him with a smile that looked real. I remember that clearly. And I remember thinking, maybe this was it. Maybe she had found someone who would see her the way I did. Who would actually show up for her. But then time passed. And slowly, that smile of hers started to fade. Not all at once. Just little things at first. She started calling less. Her texts got shorter. Her laugh, the real one, the one that used to shake her whole body, stopped showing up. I tried to ignore it at first. Told myself she was just tired. That marriage was a different kind of rhythm. But something about her felt off. Like her light had dimmed just a little bit. And once you notice that kind of shift in someone you love, it becomes impossible to unsee. Mitchell was not cruel. He never yelled. Never hit. But he had this way of disappearing even when he was sitting right there in the room. He would come home late. Always buried in work. Or maybe just buried in the idea of work. He would nod when Kylie talked, but rarely responded. And when he did, it was short, like she was interrupting something more important. It was like watching someone shrink in slow motion. And I did not know how to stop it. Kylie started leaning on me more again. Little things at first. Asking me to grab lunch. Dropping by unannounced. Staying longer than usual when she did. And whenever I looked at her, really looked, I saw someone who was trying so hard to hold it together but was quietly falling apart behind her eyes. She had always been reserved, even as a kid, but this was different. There was sadness for her now. One that she tried to hide, but I could feel it in the silence between her words. I remember one afternoon, we were sitting in my kitchen. She was talking about something random, maybe a new recipe or a show she had started watching. And I looked over and said something simple like, "You good?" She froze for a second, then gave this tight smile and said, "Yeah, just tired." But her eyes told the truth. That was the moment I knew something deeper was going on. She used to smile with her eyes. But something about her changed. Slowly. Quietly. And I did not know it yet, but that change was already unraveling the story we thought we were living. Something had cracked beneath the surface. And soon, that crack would split everything wide open. The signs were not obvious at first. Kylie was always the type to carry things quietly, to shoulder more than she let on. But slowly, almost invisibly, she started slipping out of reach. It began with little things. A lunch she forgot we scheduled. A few unanswered texts. A missed call here and there. I chalked it up to life. Work. Stress. But when you know someone the way I knew Kylie, silence does not feel empty. It feels loud. I started noticing that our conversations felt clipped. Her replies got shorter. Her laughter, when it showed up, felt rehearsed. There were these long pauses between my questions and her answers, like she was trying to think of the safest version of the truth. And sometimes, she would say she was too tired to talk. Or too busy. But it was not the kind of tiredness that comes from a long day. It was the kind that comes from carrying something heavy. One night, I called her around 11. It rang and rang. No answer. That was unusual. We had this unspoken thing. No matter what, we picked up for each other. Always. I texted. She didn't respond until the next morning, saying she fell asleep early. But her voice on that call later didn't sound rested. It sounded hollow. Like she was somewhere else entirely. Then came the photo. I was helping her clean out a closet one afternoon. She had this old shoebox tucked behind some books. Photos, letters, scraps of memory. I pulled out a picture, not thinking much of it at first. But something about it caught my eye. Kylie was in it, smiling, the real kind, with a man I didn't recognize. They looked close. Comfortable. Not just friends. I asked, curious. "Who's this?" She barely looked up. "Oh, that's Carlos. That was years ago. Nothing important." Her tone was flat. Dismissive. But I caught the quick shift in her expression before she turned away. Like something in her tightened. Carlos. The name sat in the back of my mind like a loose thread begging to be pulled. I didn't push her on it. Not right away. But that picture stayed with me. I kept thinking about the way she looked in it. Free. Like she belonged to herself back then in a way she didn't anymore. From that point, I started noticing more. Nights when she'd come home way later than usual. Clothes that didn't quite match the story she told. Days where she looked like she hadn't slept at all. There was one night, I remember this clearly, I was parked across the street from her place, just waiting to drop something off. Her car pulled in. The headlights cut across the lawn. And when she stepped out, she paused. Just stood there in the driveway, eyes closed, like she needed a second before going inside. Like home wasn't a place that brought her peace anymore. I didn't call out to her. I just watched. Part of me felt like I was intruding. The other part knew I needed to understand what was going on. She wasn't herself. And the hardest part was knowing she was hurting but choosing not to let me in. That used to be the thing we did best, honesty in the hard moments. But now, there were walls. And no matter how gently I knocked, she kept them up. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. Her name flashed across the screen. She asked if I could come over. That was all she said. No emoji. No joke. No voice note. Just 7 words. Can you come over for a bit? There was something about how she said it. Something in her voice. It cracked a little. Not loud. Just enough to hear what was underneath. That was the moment I knew. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Her apartment was quiet when I walked in. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. The kind that presses against your skin and makes your chest feel too tight. The lights were dim. No TV. No music. Just that thick kind of stillness that tells you something is waiting. She was sitting on the couch, one leg tucked underneath her, a throw blanket pulled across her lap like armor. She looked smaller than usual. She always had a presence, not loud, but solid. That night, she looked like she was trying to disappear into the fabric of her own home. I sat across from her, not saying anything at first. I figured if she had something to say, she would say it. I have learned that sometimes silence does more than words ever could. Still, even in that moment, I was hoping maybe this was all in my head. Maybe she just needed to vent. Maybe Mitchell had forgotten an anniversary or said something careless. Maybe this was nothing. She didn't look at me. Just kept running her fingers along the edge of the blanket. Her hands moved like she needed to keep them busy or they might betray her. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. I've been hiding something from you. From everyone. She stopped. Took a breath. Then another. Like the words themselves had weight, and she needed to build the strength to lift them. I didn't know who else to tell. And then, just like that, the floor beneath me gave out. She said she had seen Carlos again. The same Carlos from the photo. It wasn't planned, she said. They bumped into each other at a bookstore. She had been killing time one afternoon, just trying to feel like herself again. She didn't even recognize him at first. But he remembered her. They talked. Just talked. For a while. Caught up. He asked about her life. She asked about him. They both said they were fine, but of course, they weren't. She said it started with coffee. Just once. Then again. Then again. She said he made her feel remembered. Like she existed. Like someone actually saw her. Mitchell stopped seeing me, she said. He looks at me but never really looks. He hears me but does not listen. I don't know when it changed. I just know that it did. I sat there, trying to stay calm. Trying to listen the way I always promised her I would. But inside, I was shaking. This was Kylie. The one who always did the right thing. The one who kept everyone else together. She was the fixer. The steady one. She was the one who made sure birthdays were remembered, who sent thank you notes, who knew how to hold space for everyone else's mess. But here she was, telling me that she had stepped outside her marriage. That she had chosen to let someone else in. I felt like my breath got stuck somewhere in my throat. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was confused. Scared, even. I had never seen her like this before. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't trying to justify anything. She looked exhausted. Like she had been holding something too heavy for too long, and she was finally letting it fall. She kept talking. Said they hadn't meant for it to become what it did. She said she tried to stop it. Tried to tell herself it didn't mean anything. But then it did. Carlos started showing up in places that used to be hers and Mitchell's. The cafe on 6th. The art gallery downtown. The places where she used to feel like a person and not just a wife. And even though she hated herself for it, she said those hours with Carlos felt like breathing after holding her breath for years. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just watched her unravel, and all I could think was how I never saw this coming. How did I miss this? How did I let her fall so far without catching it? She wiped her face once, then again, and said she understood if I hated her. I told her I didn't. I couldn't. But the truth was, I didn't know what I felt. I was still in the middle of it, and none of it made sense. She looked at me with this broken sort of hope in her eyes. Like she knew she'd made a mistake, but part of her was begging me not to walk away. And I didn't. I stayed. But something had shifted between us. Something we couldn't take back. Kylie sat across from me, staring at the floor. Her hands were trembling slightly. She wasn't crying anymore, but she looked like she had nothing left in her. Like she had poured out everything she had been holding, and now there was just this hollow space where certainty used to live. She started talking again, slowly. Not like she was trying to explain herself, but more like she needed to say the words out loud to believe they were real. She told me about the day she saw Carlos again. Said she walked into that cafe expecting nothing. Just a quick stop. Maybe a quiet corner to sit with her thoughts for a while. And then there he was, at the counter, ordering the same drink he used to get when they were younger. He looked up. Recognized her instantly. They talked. She told him she was married. He told her he was not. There was a pause between them after that, she said. Not awkward, just charged. They didn't flirt. Didn't plan to meet again. But they both knew they would. She said at first, it felt harmless. Two people catching up. Sharing stories that didn't matter. It was easier than talking to Mitchell, she told me. With Carlos, she didn't feel like she was walking on eggshells. She could be angry. She could be tired. She could say what she wanted without being met with silence or an empty nod. Carlos made me feel like I mattered again. Like someone actually wanted to hear what I was thinking. That is what she said. Word for word. And I believed her. That was the hardest part. I believed her. She wasn't trying to dress it up. She was ashamed. You could hear it in the cracks between her sentences. But she also looked relieved, like someone who had been drowning and finally came up for air, even if she was gasping. She admitted she felt guilty. Every single time she met up with Carlos, she would come home and look at Mitchell and feel like she was living two lives. One where she existed. And one where she disappeared the moment she walked through the door. She told me it wasn't that she stopped loving Mitchell. It was that she couldn't remember if she ever really loved him the way a person should love someone they marry. She said maybe she had been in love with the idea of him. The structure. The plan. The sense of safety. But real love? The kind that fills you up and challenges you and holds you accountable, she didn't know if that had ever been there. I sat there, trying to be the brother she needed, the one who listens without judgment. But inside, my thoughts were a mess. She was crying in front of me, but all I felt was anger. Not at her. Not at Carlos either. In silence. The silence between her and Mitchell. The silence that stretched for years and became the third presence in their house. It made everything else possible. It made her feel invisible. I hated that. I hated that it got to this point. That no one said anything when things got hard. That two people could live under the same roof, sleep in the same bed, and still feel like strangers. Kylie wiped her nose with the back of her hand. She looked at me and asked if I thought she was a terrible person. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because there wasn't a simple answer. What do you say to the person you love most in the world when they are holding the pieces of something they broke? How do you look at them and still see the same person? I told her I didn't see her as a bad person. I told her I saw someone who was drowning quietly for a long time. And maybe she reached for the wrong hand to pull her out. But I understood why she reached. She nodded, but her eyes didn't let go of mine. That's when she said it. There's something else. Her voice cracked again. What I've told you so far, that's not all of it. I leaned in. My stomach tightened. There was this pause, maybe just a few seconds long, but it felt like the room stopped breathing. And then she said something that made my stomach drop. Her voice was shaking. Her hands, clenched in her lap, looked like they were trying to hold something together that was already falling apart. She was barely meeting my eyes, but when she did, it was like looking at someone who had drifted so far out that they could no longer see the shore. She spoke softly, but every word felt like it landed in the center of my chest. "I'm pregnant, Santino. And I don't know who the father is." The room went silent. I couldn't even hear the clock anymore. My own thoughts just stopped. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My mouth opened slightly like my body was trying to form a response, but my brain couldn't catch up. I kept replaying her words in my head, thinking maybe I misheard. Maybe she said something else. Anything else. But I hadn't. "I'm pregnant. I don't know who the father is." She looked at me, and the expression on her face wasn't fear. It wasn't even a panic. It was something worse. Surrender. Like she had already accepted the damage and was just waiting for me to walk away. She curled into herself on the couch, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around her stomach like she was trying to protect something no one else could see. Her shoulders shook. I hadn't seen her cry like that since we were kids, when she fell off her bike, blood running down her knee, and I sat with her in the middle of the street until she could stand again. Back then, I knew what to do. I was the little brother, but I felt like the strong one. The one who could always help her. Now, I just felt helpless. I stood there, frozen. Part of me wanted to run to her, to hold her, to say something comforting. But nothing felt right. Nothing I could say would undo this. Would make it make sense. I felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to the back of my head and I was still standing, dazed, trying to understand why everything was suddenly tilted sideways. She sniffled, wiped her face, and looked up. "I took a test today. I'm 6 weeks along." That hit harder than the first part. It made it real. This wasn't a what if. It was happening. And now there was a timeline attached to it. I sat down slowly, like the weight of it was too much to carry standing up. My mind was moving in 10 different directions, all at once. Carlos. Mitchell. A baby. The way none of this had an easy answer. I looked at my sister. The girl who used to sneak me extra dessert when Mom said no. The one who whispered secrets to me through the walls when we were supposed to be asleep. The one who always made me feel like I mattered. Now she was in pieces. And I couldn't fix any of it. She broke the silence again, voice barely above a breath. "What would you do if you were me?" There was no edge in her tone. No challenge. Just a question from someone desperate for a way forward. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the rug, at the way her foot tapped against it. My thoughts kept looping. What would I do? What would anyone do? I finally looked at her. Not as my sister, but as a person who had been drowning in silence for too long. Who had made choices she couldn't take back. Who now had to live with all of it. I'd stop. She didn't respond. Just nodded slowly. Like she'd been waiting for someone to say it out loud. Like she knew it already, but needed to hear it from someone who still loved her. And I did. I still loved her. But that night changed everything. Not in a dramatic, movie-ending kind of way. But in the quiet shift between who we were, and who we would be from that point forward. The next morning, the air felt heavy. Everything looked the same, the street, the sky, the people passing by, but I knew something had shifted. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying her voice in my head, the way it cracked when she said she didn't know what to do. And when I finally closed my eyes, I dreamt of being kids again. Her pushing me on the swings. Us building a fort in the living room with blankets and chairs. Back when the world made sense. Before words like betrayal and paternity tests and heartbreak were even part of our vocabulary. She texted me just after 7. "Breakfast?" I said yes. We met at this diner we used to go to after school. Same old chipped mugs. Same sticky menus. I got there first. When she walked in, she looked different. Not lighter, exactly. Not better. But focused. Like someone who had decided that pretending was no longer an option. She didn't wear makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes were red. But she walked over, slid into the booth across from me, and reached for my hand. I gave it to her. I didn't speak. She said she was going to tell Mitchell today. She didn't know how. Didn't have a plan. But she couldn't carry it any longer. It was eating her alive. Every day she waited was a day she had to lie to someone who still believed she was the same woman he married. And she wasn't. Not anymore. I nodded. I didn't tell her what to say. I didn't ask what she expected him to do. I didn't say she owed him a second chance or that she should leave. That wasn't my place. I was just there to sit with her while her hands shook over black coffee and burnt toast. When we finished eating, she walked with me to the corner. We stood there for a second, neither of us knowing what to say next. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. Harder than she ever had. Not the kind of hug you give someone because you're supposed to. The kind that says, I don't know what comes next, but I'm grateful you stayed. She whispered it into my ear. Whatever happens. Thanks for not walking away. And then she crossed the street, climbed into her car, and drove off. I stood there until her taillights disappeared. I didn't go home right away. I walked. No music. No calls. Just me and the morning. I kept thinking about how everything changed in the span of one conversation. One night. One secret spoken aloud. And how now, we were in this space that wasn't broken but wasn't whole either. She did what so many people don't. She told the truth. Not the polished version. The hard one. The kind that ruins things and frees you at the same time. And I stood by her. Not because I agreed with what she did. But because love isn't always about agreement. Sometimes it's about staying when it would be easier to walk away. About holding space for someone who made a mess, but still deserves to be seen as a person, not just the worst thing they've done. As I reached my building, I stopped and looked up at our old apartment window, the one where we used to sit and count stars we couldn't see through the city haze. And for a moment, I let myself feel all of it. The sadness. The anger. The love. The loss. The strange kind of hope that maybe, just maybe, something honest could grow from everything that had fallen apart. And then, I went inside. Sometimes, love isn't about perfection. It's about what you do when everything breaks. My sister broke, but she didn't run. And neither did I. If you're still here, thank you for listening. This wasn't an easy story to tell, and it sure wasn't easy to live through. But sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that bring us closer, to ourselves, and to the people we care about. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of someone you love, or a moment you've had to carry in silence, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Talk to me. Talk to each other. And if you think someone needs to hear this, send it to them. Sometimes, one honest story is all it takes to open a door for someone else. Tap the like button if this spoke to you, subscribe if you want more stories that don't hold back, and share it if you believe these conversations matter. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.